Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Learn With Me. I'm Deborah Hanson. Today, we're going to be looking at AP Human Geography 1.7 Regional Analysis. This is the last section of Unit 1, Thinking Geographically. So today, I'm going to go through all the essential information you need to know to prepare for the test. So here, you're going to see all the key terms that are important to 1.7 Regional Analysis. Now, I do have a separate video where I just basically go through the key terms with an example, a definition, and an exam tip. And that's just the words. This is really more about answering the CED question. Now, key terms in AP Human Geography are super important. So it really is the key to the five because you need to be able to not only define them, but you need to be able to apply them. And that's going to get you that 5 on the exam. So super important to have these written down on flashcards or practice on Quizlets or whatever you decide to do to basically know those key terms is really going to make a difference for you on test day. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through the CED question for 1.7, which is describe different ways that geographers define regions. And I'm going to talk about all the essential knowledge you need to be able to answer this particular question. Now, that is going to involve a lot of those key terms that we talked about in the last slide. So that's going to be really important for you to pay attention with that. If you want the link to the full slideshow with all the details, I've got study notes and a workbook and everything you need to do to be able to study for Unit 1 or for the exam. You can find the link in the description below to my Teacher Pay Teacher store where you can find it all. Okay, so let's start by talking about regional analysis. Regional analysis is the study of a specific area that shares common traits like physical features, culture, economy, or society. Geographers use it to look for patterns and connections within an area to figure out what makes it unique and how it connects to a bigger geographic context. Here's the key point. Regions can be studied at different scales, global, national, or local. That means a geographer could study a region as big as the Middle East, as broad as the entire US, or as local as a single city. So for example, the Corn Belt in the US is a region known for corn production. By studying it, geographers can see not just where corn is grown, but also how farming ties into culture, the economy, and even global trade. So regional analysis is about zooming in on an area, identifying its defining features, and then understanding how those features matter at a larger scale. Now we move on to site, another key term. Site refers to the physical characteristics of a place, things like landforms, climate, soil, vegetation, and natural resources. These are the features that affect how people live there, the kinds of settlements they build, and how the place develops over time. So for example, New York City's site includes a natural harbor and access to rivers. Those features make it a key location for trade and settlement because they provide safe docking and easy connections to inland areas. So site is all about the natural, physical setting of a place, not its connections to other places, but the actual characteristics of the land itself. Next, we're going to talk about situation, another key term. So while site describes the physical characteristics of a place, situation describes the location relative to other places and how it connects to them. Situation is about accessibility, trade, and regional connections. So for example, Paris has a central situation in Europe. Its location made it an important hub for trade, culture, and politics because of its connections to nearby regions. Together, site and situation give us a full picture. Site explains the physical setting, like rivers, soil, or climate, while situation explains why a place matters in relation to others. This is why many cities become powerful, not just because of their physical site, but because of their strategic situation. Here's a quick exam tip. If a question asks about site, think physical features. If it asks about situation, think connections and relative location. Okay, so now we're going to look at formal regions. A formal region is an area defined by shared characteristics. These can include physical features, cultural traits, economic activities, or political boundaries. The key idea is that these traits are consistent throughout the region and set it apart from others. For example, the Sahara Desert is considered a formal region because it is defined by its dry climate and desert landscape. Another example could be countries with official borders like France or Brazil, or even the Corn Belt in the US where corn production dominates. What's important to remember is that formal regions are clear and uniform. Everyone in that region shares the same characteristic, whether it's climate, government, or language. Here's an exam tip. On the AP exam, if you see the word uniform or homogeneous, Think formal region. Another region you need to know about is functional region, which are also called nodal regions. A functional region is organized around a central point. The activity or influence is strongest at the center and it fades as you move farther away. These regions are defined by connections, things like trade, transportation, or communication. So, for example, the area served by a newspaper, a TV station, or a city subway system is its functional region. Each is centered on a hub. The farther you are from the hub, the weaker the connection. So the key idea with functional regions is that they're built around a central node and everything else connects back to that node. Here's an exam tip. If you see the word node, hub, or center of activity on the AP exam, think functional region. The last region we're going to talk about is vernacular regions. They're also called perceptual regions. A vernacular region is not defined by strict boundaries or official lines. Instead, it's based on how people believe or perceive the area that exists. It's often because of a shared culture, identity, or history. These regions don't have exact borders. They're created in people's minds. So, for example, the American South is often considered a vernacular region. People associate it with things like accents or food or religion and traditions. But if you ask different people where the South begins and ends, you're probably going to get different answers. The key idea here is that a vernacular region is about perception. They exist because people think of them as regions, not because they're official boundaries. Here's your exam tip. If you see words like perception, identity, or belief, think vernacular region. Okay, so let's bring that all together by looking at the three main types of regions in AP Human Geography: formal, functional, and vernacular. First, we're going to talk about formal regions. They are areas defined by shared characteristics. These can be physical traits like climate or landforms, or cultural and political traits like language or laws. The Sahara Desert is a good example because it's defined by its dry climate, which is consistent across the regions. Second, functional regions, also called nodal regions. They're organized around a central point or node. These regions are connected by systems of trade, transportation, communication. For example, a city subway system or a newspaper delivery area are functional regions because they operate around a central hub. Finally, vernacular regions, also known as perceptual regions. They're based on people's beliefs, cultures, or identity. These regions don't have exact borders. They exist because people think of them as regions. The American South or the Middle East are example because people associate them with a certain trait, or even though their boundaries are not very clearly drawn. So let's remember this. Formal equals shared traits. Functional equals central node. Vernacular equals perception and identity. That's how geographers categorize and study different types of regions. Here's your exam tip. If a question is asking about regions based on facts like climate or language, it's formal. If it's about connections to a hub, it's functional. If it's about people's ideas or perception, it's vernacular. Okay, so now we know about the regions. Let's talk about how scale, whether global or local, changes the way geographers analyze regions. At the global scale, geographers examine big patterns and trends across the entire world. For example, the tropical climate region spans South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. At this scale, you're going to see the big picture, things like climate zones, trade routes, or world religions. At the local level, geographers zoom in on much smaller areas, like one tropical region in the Amazon. Here you may notice different types of agriculture or settlement patterns, even within the same climate zone. Local scales reveal the detailed, specific information like housing, zoning, or urban land use. The global scale can't show that. The key takeaway is that global patterns doesn't always tell us the full story locally, and that's a trend that looks uniform worldwide. It may vary from one town or neighborhood to the other. So why does this all matter on the AP exam? Always look at the scale of data or map you're given. If the question asks about a local issue, but you use global data, you may run into a scale mismatch. That's a common FRQ pitfall, by the way. So remember, global scales give broad insight, but local scales uncover the details. Geographers have to decide if a region is best studied at the global, national, or regional level, or local level, to avoid missing important information. Two other really important concepts in geography is interdependence and spatial association. Interdependence is when places or regions rely on each other for things like resources, services, labor, or information. So for example, oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia export energy, while industrial countries like Japan rely on that energy to run their factories and transport systems. This shows how global and regional connections create a reliance on others for goods, knowledge, and support. On the other hand, spatial association looks at at how often two or more phenomena occur together in the same place or pattern. So if things frequently show up in the same location, they might be related. So for example, high poverty rates often correlate with low access to healthcare or education in certain regions. So why do these concepts matter in regional analysis? Well, they reveal relationships between regions such as trade, migration, or pollution. They help geographers identify causes of patterns and predict outcomes. They also show how change in one region can affect another. In short, interdependence highlights the way places depend on each other, while spatial associations helps us see the connections between the patterns that occur in the same place. So together, it gives us a fuller picture of how the world works geographically. The last thing we're going to talk about in 1.7 is sense of place. Sense of place refers to the emotional, cultural, or personal meaning that people attach to a location. It's not just about where a place is on the map, it's about how that place makes people feel. So, for example, a neighborhood park might feel special because of the memories you've had there, like playing as a kid or spending time with your family. And for others, it might connect to a cultural identity, like a religious site or historical landmark that represents a shared value. So, sense of place can be shaped by things like memories people have in that place, experience that they've lived their experiences, cultural identity like tradition or heritage, and lastly, symbolism or value, such as a place representing freedom or home or community. The key idea here is that sense of place makes geography personal. It's what turns a simple location into a meaningful place in people's lives. So that's all the essential knowledge for 1.7 regional analysis. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more about the AP Human Geography units that are going to be coming along. I also have AP Psychology working on AP World, and we'll keep adding these APs to the channel to help you prepare for that AP exam. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you next time.